Greetings and salutations. The idea for this scenario is based off of the last fight for Tank 66 in the Team Yankee rule set. In this case here, I have a German civilian found that there was an unusual Russian tank and took some pictures, sent it to the local American commanders, and they sent out a couple of helicopters out there to find out what was going on. And the helicopters got hit and they made it back to base. So now the battle is joined. We now know that there are Russian forces there. We have a T-72 tank company here that is guarding the lone Russian prototype tank. We've got a platoon of motorized rifle infantry there with their bumps as support. Off to the side we have Americans. Off to the side here we've got a pair of 901 ATVs or ITVs, okay, with the company commander and the second in command. We have got one platoon of M1 tanks over here ready to go. Over across the table over here we have another platoon of American M1 tanks, and as you can see, this is the view that they have there of the village. And the last unit that the Americans have is Gudmundsson, the village, or what's left of it, and a pair of Cobras. They're ready to go and wreak havoc on those guys over there. So this is the setting for the background of our scenario. Just to let you guys know that I'm going to have some special rules for the scenario. The objective for the Russians is to get their prototype tank off the board that way, and the Americans are trying to stop them. So we'll see what happens with turn one. So here we are at the end of the American half of turn one. The M1 tank platoon advanced, fired on this Russian tank company, effectively taking 3 of them out. Talk about getting lucky, rolls of 5s and 6s because the tanks started out concealed and gone to ground. The helicopters over here, well, I'm afraid they didn't do anything. They missed. Over here we have our M901 ITVs. They didn't do anything. Our company commander, the captain, and his second in command, they fired, took out one T-72 here, one T-72 over here, and our last valiant American M1 platoon charged out, tried to fire on here, and just bailed out one guy. That's it for American turn one. We're at the end of the Russian half of turn one. The Russians are fighting back. The remaining tank of one of the T-72 companies fired, blew up this Abrams. The tanks over here fired on our ITVs, blew up one of them. The other guy survived the platoon check. And the lone company here fired on the M1s, destroyed one tank. The commander moved out of the woods toward the roadway to shore up the flagging defense line. The Russians did not repair their prototype tank. So we are now moving on into turn two. So here we are at the end of American turn two. The helicopters fired their missiles at the BMP and bailed it out. Our M1 Abrams platoon moved, they fired, took out a couple more, took out another tank, and the other one stayed for the morale because they're loving it. The ITV fired on this tank right here and blew it up. The commander the captain and his second in command brewed up another one. And our last known American M1 tank platoon, -1 tank, went, fired, and blew up the last T-72 of that one company. So one company has been scratched. This second company here, there was one tank left, but they failed morale. They fell off the board. But it's still not over yet, because they still have to get their hands on that prototype. Okay, we'll catch you for the Russian half of turn 2. Okay, we're at the end of Russian turn 2 and things are heating up. We finally got the prototype done. Yay! It's moving. It moved a little bit, not in the direction they should be going, like the shortest end of the board, but shortest edge of the board. They fired, and they did take out the last ITV there. The bump tried to take out the ITV earlier, failed miserably. The motor company is now moving out. Hopefully in the attempts maybe they can fire something at the M1s, but the missiles are not that effective at this point. These guys fired on the M1 platoon and hit. Possible bail, no results. The commander fired here. The bump fired here at this lone M1 platoon. Boldly missed. At least the tank is now, prototype is now moving. We gotta try to get it out. We'll see what happens on turn 3. We're at the end of American turn 3. M1 tank platoon shifted to the left to start firing and, well, taking out the last T-72 here. The other two M1s fired on the prototype, and they have immobilized it according to the rules. They need to hit it like a regular tank, okay, like the regular T-72, except their firepower is reduced. You have to add +2 for the firepower. So instead of a firepower of 2, it's a firepower of 4. Makes it a little bit harder. But right now, the prototype tank has been immobilized. So they can try to repair it next turn. Remember about the time scale here for Team Yankee, and the helicopters moved from Gutmünchen and decided to spray fire on the motor infantry. Too bad it didn't do anything to them, except scratch some paint off their helmets. The commander, the formation commander, tried to open fire with his self-defense AA machine gun on the helicopter. No results, no effect. Okay, so we're now going into the Soviet half of turn 3. Stay tuned. Looking at the end of Russian turn 3, the Russians are fighting back. Okay, prototype passed the cross-check, moved back into the woods. The infantry moved along with them. Commander pulled back on the road along with the bump and fired. No effect. Well, actually it hit, but the armor did not penetrate. The bump 2 here, showing what a Spitfire it is, actually took out the formation commander's tank. Yes, the captain's tank. But, you know, his friend is right there, so he's going to commandeer that tank. And he did. Amazing. So, other than that, there has been no other effect, but the game still goes on. Yes, I did allow for the Russian prototype to make repairs from being immobilized, because that's the only way to keep the game going, right? Because remember, it's the narrative. All right, catch you later on the flip side. Okay, we're looking at the American half of turn 4. Okay, and at this point the M1s moved to here. The commander moved from this spot here all the way around there, did a mad dash to get out of the way. The M1 platoon that was over here has moved out here, and they fired on the Russian task force commander. His tank is now gone, but the game's still not over. It's a question of the prototype. Meanwhile, our Cobras here, this Cobra did something, took out the bump. Okay, this Cobra aimed at this bump and missed. So, and these guys here try to immobilize our prototype tank. They failed. So right now the prototype tank is still on the move. Now we break for a commercial. And welcome back, Team Yankee fans, as we are at the conclusion of Russian Turn 4. As you can see, the Russian prototype escaped the woods and is boldly making his way to the edge. The Motor Rifle Company is trying to follow up. Tried to take a shot at this M1 here, failed miserably. The BMP that was responsible for taking out the captain's tank is now over here. Moved over, but he cannot shoot. And this bump, BMP-2, did not make it. Just bogged in the woods. Alright. This is probably going to be ending now because the Russians are so close. They're so close to getting that prototype off. Can they make it? We'll find out. Well, folks, we're at the bottom half of American Turn 6. And the M1s rearranged themselves so they could take side shots at the prototype. These M1s here brought themselves so they could open fire on the prototype. The captain came all the way from around here, literally went all the way, dashed, whatever you want to call it. The Cobras fired salvo rockets on the infantry. One of the salvo rockets made it. A number of infantry were hit, but they were not affected, and neither was the BMP-2. So it's really boiled down to the main focus of the game. What about our prototype? What happened? Well, these M1s fired with the intent to immobilize the tank. They failed. They hit 3 times out of 6 shots. They penetrated, but they did not make their firepower rolls. That was pretty bad. Okay, all their firepower rolls just did not work. So finally a decision was made, and that decision was for these M1s here to fire on here, shoot to kill. That's it, end of story. 6 dice were rolled, only 2 hits, both penetrated. One was a bail, the other was an outright kill. So thus comes the end of another fight here in the Leipzig sector, as the Russians did not get their prototype tank back. And I pull back on the battlefield, and as we would say, good fight, good night, you Team Yankee fans.